Welcome. Here with me today are two artists that will be performing at the CPAMO's gathering in May 27th to 29th. I have Nova Bhattacharya, who will be performing on the 28th, and Michael Fraser,
yes,
who will also be performing on the 27th as part of the writers' conversation. It's pretty simple. Nova, tell us about your artistic practice. What's involved in it?
I'm a dancer, choreographer, and as Michael and I were just discussing, I sometimes like to call myself a body poet, taking a physical language, a physical vocabulary. My technical training is in an Indian classical dance style, Bharatanatyam, which has a very rigorous rhythmic base. And a very, very rich practice of transmission, of narrative, of abstraction, and using all these things to arouse empathy in an audience. And I have been making work in Canada for over 2 decades, so the work I do is very much informed by my life here.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, this idea of narrative as a poet, could you tell us some more about how you approach your artistic practice as a poet?
How I approach it? It's an interesting question. I don't think I necessarily have a specific approach. It all depends on the poem, the project. For example, I'm completing a manuscript right now, which is based on Black Canadians who fought during the American Civil War. And I'm almost done. Because I have a topic, a subject, and I had to do some research, the poems are appearing very differently than the normal course of if you're walking down the street, you observe something, or you're taking all the world's pain and just spread it out onto the page. And speaking of narrative, I think most poets are self-indulgent on some level. One thing I have noticed, we tend to have experienced quite a bit of pain or just lives that aren't quote-unquote, run-of-the-mill, ordinary. I don't think I've ever met a poet who, I grew up in the suburbs and my parents, sent me to this great school, and I graduated this, and then I went to Yale. None of that. It's always like, my father was an alcoholic, and he beat us, and that's generally. So there's a lot of pain, and the personal narrative comes out, and that's how we deal with a lot of the pain we've endured. The other thing too is the amount of depression amongst poets is quite remarkable. I can't believe it. It's almost like 1 in 5. Sorry, 50%. I was going to say 1 in 50, no, 50%. Like, where are you on? Oh, I'm taking this. Where are you taking? I'm taking this. Oh, I saw my shrink the other day. Right? So it's like, man, we are broken people. But you know what they say about being broken? That's how the light gets in. So poetry is my light.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned this idea of when it appears to you. When the poems appear to you, how do you actually document them? Do you use your phone, use a recorder, do you write them down on a piece of paper? What is that like for you?
Okay, the poem never appears to me. I think that's a notion that was born in the Romantic period. Prior to that, poets, worked like everybody else. Then once Romanticism came around, then you had to inhale, you had to imbibe God, you had to be sanctified and produce this wonderful heavenly verse. And due to that, a lot of Romantic poets weren't as, I don't want to use the word productive because it's very industrial, but they did not write as much as they could have, because if you sit around and wait for inspiration, you're not going to be inspired all the time. So the poem doesn't come, the ideas come. I think Lucille Clifton made that that differentiation of the idea and then the poem. So it's the ideas that always come first.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what comes first for you, Nova? In your practice, when you get that call that says, I must move and I must create, how do you go about that?
Well, there's a number of different entry points for me, and one of the things that resonates with what Michael's talking about is a few years ago I made a piece called Infinite Storms, which was actually inspired by the ideas of pain and isolation and anguish, and creating a danced metaphor for, realizing and embodying those moments, but also offering the audience hope that community and compassion is a way to move through these things. So that one was actually a piece I've been carrying with me for a long time and have been avoiding making because I had a personal relationship with chronic pain and didn't want to go there in my work. But then the universe just kept pushing it into my face. And then I finally had no choice and I did it. And then also for me, I'm a choreographer who works with other dancers, and I'm also a choreographer who creates work for myself. So those are two very different muscles, which also then create different entry points. Yes. So when it's other dancers, the joy of movement research really feeds me who I have in the room, what they're bringing in, where can we go, how can they surprise each other, how can they surprise me. And but yeah, and then sometimes just being somewhere doing nothing, staring up at the sky is what makes the ideas and the visions and the pictures float in your mind, and you think, okay, I need to get into the studio and make a piece. So I find, I'm sure you find this too, that being an artist is just kind of all-consuming. It's not, we as dancers, choreographers, we'll call the studio our office, but the reality is no matter what we're doing, we're observing, we're picking up, so it's really hard, I think, to tell sometimes exactly where it comes from.
Yes, the separation in the two. I'm curious to continue that thought and talk about what is the surprise we're going to see in that particular performance that you plan to do on the 28th?
Well, right now I don't know if you're going to see 2 performers or 4 performers. And what I'm going to be working on, what I've been working on with my company and the dancers I work with is a lot of structured improvisation in live performance. And this is coming from the discipline because I use a lot of dancers trained in Indian classical dance styles. There's a different experience of improvisation than the one I'm proposing to the artists. So it's always really just tactile and charged and exciting to know that I'm going to go in. And this time I actually know exactly what the structure is I want to give them. I often, I'm like, okay, we'll figure that out in the studio, but this time I have this really clear idea and 2 dancers for sure who are quite different in their personal delivery of material and things like that. So I just really want to see that juxtaposition, which I think will create some surprises. And then I'm also working with dancers in this idea of holding space, even if you're not the one performing or doing steps. So there are some other artists who I'm going to be working with that might be in the space and be definitely a part of the piece, but what new way will that affect the audience to see people on stage who are part of something but not necessarily following the same score as the others?
Yes, great. And how will you hold space?
Insinuate myself into that space.
And how will you hold space on the 22nd?
Hopefully in front of an audience. I'm not sure if they'll have. I'm not sure what it's going to. This is my first time at this event. As long as there's a microphone, I'll be happy. And I will read my poems and perform the 2 or 3 that I still have remembered. But yeah, I read my poems and expose my life and my pain, and spread it out there.
What if you don't have a microphone?
Oh, I can project. Yeah, I can project my voice. So yeah, I may seem.
I'm being facetious.
I know you're being facetious.
As the program manager, I can tell you that you probably will not have a microphone.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Because you'll be part of the writers in conversation.
Oh,
and so
okay.
we're actually looking at the ways in which what we've been doing a lot since our last gathering, we're looking at ways in which we animate space, and the ways in which, as mentioned, we take up space.
Okay.
And we realized that a lot of the magical moments were not from the performative aspects, but actually upsetting a panel or upsetting a sort of circular space with
I have learned
art
a lot
in that particular space.
It completely changes my vision.
Yes. And it's an introduction as well to hold space differently.
Okay.
Sometimes I think as performers, we go into a space and we go, it's going to be the magic lights, and it's going to be with wings, and I'm a dancer as well. So, so we've been really, since the last gathering, looking at how we actually shift some of those particular perspectives around what performance is and what showcasing is, but also what is interaction between artists and writers and dancers in different ways.
Interesting.
So thanks. There's one last question that's a burning one for us, and it's basically, how do you envision yourself, your company, your artistic practice in a contemporary Canadian society?
We should do each other.
I'm all over the map. I mean, right now I'm focused on historical Black Canadian experiences, and my book published in 2016, To Greet Yourself Arriving, is essentially an homage to diasporic Africans throughout the Americas, and there's at least 22 from Canada, lots from the States obviously, lots from the Caribbean, but also the Spanish Caribbean, Brazil, I just love Brazil. So I'm heavily involved in historical aspects of things, but then as a Black writer, I can't just focus on that aspect of it, and sometimes I do think we are quite pigeonholed. It's, people call you up, hey, what are you doing in February? Right? It's Black History Month. We have our Black History Month, right? And, I'm Black and I'm alive, and every day is Black history, and everything I do is Black history. So, there's one aspect that's kind of pigeonholed, and then there's, I guess, the regular Canadian, I am Canadian, and no one has the right, as far as I'm concerned, to not view me as Canadian. And just as an aside, one of the things I've noticed recently, I was having a discussion with someone about immigrants. And for me, an immigrant is someone who is from a different country. And it occurred to me as we were talking, I said, wait a minute, are immigrants people who are non-Caucasian? And it occurred to me, immigrants to them meant someone who was a visible minority. And I said, no, that's not, you're mixed, we need to define our terms. You could be from England and Sweden and be an immigrant, but so I noticed that there's a lot of, terminology that's being mixed, and then also the terminology to discuss immigration is very cataclysmic. So you have, a tide of immigrants, a sea of immigrants, waves of immigrants, we're being inundated by immigrants. So it's all negative. I think we need new language around that. And I realized I have to promote my Canadianness. Otherwise, people aren't, you can live here I've been here for 45 years, for crying out loud. I came as a toddler practically, and I'm Canadian. I survived 7 winters in Edmonton, Alberta. Right?
You're Canadian.
Yes. That's why I tell people, if I could survive 7 Edmonton winters, and I've seen the sundog sun, that prairie dog sun, most people here have not seen that. That is true Canadian winter. So yeah, there's my Black historical side, and now there's this other side where I'm just going to announce my Canadianness, and no one has a right to take that away from me. Because I have a good friend who's from Argentina originally, and we always growing up, we had the discussion about, well, where do you belong? Where do you... That in itself is Canadian. No Americans don't do that. You could just arrive in America, be there for a year, and I'm American now, right? It's so just even having that discussion. Well, I'm not sure. Do I belong here? Do I belong there? And even the high schoolers I teach, there's when they go back to their parents' country or even the country they may have been born in. I said, "How'd you feel?" They're like, "Well, people could tell I wasn't from there." And I said, "That's because you're Canadian." At the end of the day, and I think we, especially as visible minorities, we have to take on the mantle and just announce the fact to people, we are Canadian. We're not just, hyphenated Canadians.
Mm.
So hopefully that, I know I meandered and was roundabout, but yeah.
We meander all the time in CPAMO. I mean, there's many things there around also perspective, around also definition. I would like to say that I'm Jamaican Canadian because I was born in Jamaica, Canada. But I never came under circumstances that was like, oh, I'm running to go somewhere. I'm like, it was actually my choice. Why? Because family's been here for a very long time. So I think the perspective that you're talking about and the historical connection that you're approaching in your poetry and your work actually is rooting as, again, a Black identity in a different space and time. And as an artist and as a poet, that's also very, very important. So
I think one of the most ironic parts about the manuscript I'm currently working on is I can't really call them Black Canadians because they were here when it was British North America. They pre-existed Canada on this territory,
yeah.
Right? And people look at us like we're, but Black people have been here since 1619. 1619.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
it's a rich and long history.
Yes, it is. Sorry.
That's okay. No worries. No, that's also Canadian.
Well, as an artist, I always believe that our job, our purpose is to hold a mirror up to the world and also to provide a respite from it. As a dancer, choreographer, I'm working in an art form that really can transcend perceived boundaries of culture and race, I believe. So the company is really committed to being a part of the Canadian story, because by making art, by using dancers who come from rich dance training traditions, by creating dance series that showcase Toronto artists, like all the things that the company is doing is about taking space in the Canadian landscape.
Wow, I'm writing. This is poetic. But I just want to say thank you both for doing this, and what it means to be a mirror and a respite to the world, I think is what you will see May 21st to 29th. I say May 21st because it's another event we're having on May 21st as well, in collaboration with the Center for the Arts and Parole Provocation. So thank you so much, and we look forward to your performances at the gathering.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.